They've scared the shit out of people to the point that they are buying guns, they're locking, putting more locks in their doors, alarms, you name it, in a way that this now drives political outcomes. And that's a powerful and a scary thing.
Did the MAGA movement perfect white fear? They certainly didn't invent it, but did they pour gasoline on the fire?
Yes, and that is what this new documentary says, and it spells out exactly how they did it. Welcome to Sanity with Allison and Dave. Please hit subscribe if you would, as well as like.
Critical race theory is poison.
These people who hate white people?
There is now a white fear industrial complex.
Mexican criminals, Black Lives Matter terrorists,
Radical Islamic terrorism.
Where many people get very rich and very powerful by telling white America that they are under constant assault.
They want to steal your liberty, your freedom.
I want surveillance of certain mosques.
This is strategic racism.
All right, that is a clip from the new documentary sweeping the nation called White with Fear. And basically, if you're wondering how Donald Trump won or why, you need to watch this documentary because it talks about the highly orchestrated and successful campaign from Republican operatives after Obama won to lean into white fear, stoke it, and outrage. And it worked.
I will add, if you think it's the sole reason Donald Trump won twice, you are dangerously misinformed.
Let's ask our documentarian, Andrew Goldberg, who joins us now. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad.
I should mention you're an award-winning documentarian. And so this is a really, I think, maddening, frustrating, infuriating, and interesting documentary. And it's a look back at basically how the seeds were planted during Nixon's campaign and how they came into full flourishing during Donald Trump's campaign. Of course, the through line for us as former Fox News anchors is Roger Ailes, and we'll get into that in a second. So, Andrew, do you take is my premise right, that the seeds were planted basically by Roger Ailes and his colleagues during Nixon, and they came into full bloom with Donald Trump, and that's how he won?
I think that there's always been race in politics. What happens with Nixon is that it becomes formalized strategy. He brings thinkers on. He brings on a guy named Kevin Phillips. He brings on a young Pat Buchanan, who literally are writing memos about how to divide the country based on race. And if they can get the bigger half, that's how they'll win elections and hold on to power. This has become not the sole reason by any stretch, but a major, major component of right Republican political electioneering for what is going on now 55 years. And this was conceptualized actually prior to Nixon by a guy named Barry Goldwater, who peeled away 7 states that were in the opposite party of him. They were Democratic states, and he recognized that if he could lean into racial fear-mongering, he could flip them to the Republican side of the aisle, and that's what he did. Imagine if someone ran for office right now and flipped Alabama to blue and flipped Arkansas to blue. It seems almost inconceivable, but Goldwater managed to pull it off, and Nixon saw that. And that becomes a very central part of politicking over the years. Now, is it the only reason Trump won? Of course not. I mean, there's a real backlash to what I think would be over the top radical woke thinking in this country. And I think Americans were sick of that. And in many ways, rightly so, in areas where they felt that the left side of the aisle had gone far too far. And Trump recognizes that, and he appeals to that. But in terms of using this as a strategy, Trump does do it. He puts it on steroids, and it proves effective.
Just want to set the table here. I assume you're a lifelong Democrat.
I'm not talking about my politics. I'm a lifelong journalist.
Okay. It's a brilliant film. It is powerful. I enjoyed every minute of it. It hits home for someone that anchored at Fox News, without a doubt. Are you suggesting Republicans are racist?
First of all, Republicans is a big group of people. What I can say, and what the film sets to say, is that the Republican political machine and the conservative media machine both lean into racial fear-mongering to win elections. I can't read into the hearts and minds of what Republicans are. What I can say is that by scaring them, and I'm choosing my words carefully, right? Like to say, make a phrase like Republicans are racist, that's a very inflammatory sort of comment, right? Put it this way. Racialized fears exist in people in America. People who who respond to these have Miracle-Gro poured on their sentiments. So someone who might think, I don't maybe love immigrants, they scare me a little bit, goes from scared to terrified. Does that make the person a racist? I'm not sure I can make that evaluation, but I can tell you that they've scared am I allowed to swear? The heck out of, they've scared the shit out of people to the point that they are buying guns, they're locking, putting more locks in their doors, alarms, you name it, in a way that this now drives political outcomes. And that's a powerful and a scary thing.
Again, I'm not making any accusations. I just wanted to frame this. Is
Donald Trump? I can take it.
Is Donald Trump racist?
Well, I think that Donald Trump has made a lot of comments that are racist. I don't know what's in his heart. He's certainly done some things that are very, very problematic. But I don't think that that's what animates his politics. I think what animates his politics is what will get him votes. And I think that if someone were to say to him, what you need to do right now is lean into X, Y, or Z, and it was the opposite of racist, you'd find him doing that. He's a very brilliant opportunist, right? He recognizes what works for him. Like the whole thing with, he took out an ad years ago to put a bunch of kids in jail, things like that. He made some anti-Semitic comments that he only wants people with yarmulkes counting his money. He's made comments like that suggest that he behaves like a bigot. But I can't tell you Donald Trump is or isn't a racist. What I can tell you is that he uses racist strategies to win votes, and he does it successfully.
This rings a lot of personal and infuriating bells for me, at least, because everything that you've said, you could substitute Roger Ailes in for Donald Trump. And we know the playbook because we worked at Fox. And so Roger Ailes was also about ratings. He was about the bottom line and making money and ratings. So if being a non-racist had really upped the ratings, he probably would have done that. But what he did so successfully, because remember, he was one of the architects of Richard Nixon, so there's a through line here, is realize that if you lean into and stoke white fear, you get a lot of ratings. And so he did that. And we beat the drum. Dave and I have talked about this because we were on, we make a few cameos in your documentary, sitting on the curvy couch with Mike Huckabee, among others. And one of the things I remember that Roger did was we talked about the mosque at Ground Zero and how dangerous the mosque at Ground Zero was. And how could they be building a mosque at Ground Zero? And that showed Muslim imperialism hovering over the graveyard of 9/11. And we beat that drum over and over again until the ratings started to soften. People weren't that interested. There was nothing actually happening at the mosque at Ground Zero. And we never talked about it again. Because it turns out he didn't really care. He wanted about the ratings. And I just have a million examples of that. So we saw it up close of how effective it can be. And so you interview Steve Bannon. He owns it, right?
Yeah. Bannon said to me point blank, how can we bring in more white voters to the fold? And the way that they did this was by, leaning in on the problems, both real and perceived problems of immigration, and really focusing on the worst parts of that. Now, the trouble with phrases like, when you ask me, Dave, is Trump a racist? I don't know, but I do know that Roger Ailes certainly recognized that there was billions of dollars to be made from doing a lot of things that let me just say, are very problematic when it comes to racial conversations.
One more of these, and I promise that I'll move past them. The fact that this is such an effective strategy, what does it say about the country? Are we inherently a bit racist?
Okay, that I can answer more effectively, and the answer to that question is yes. I believe that there is a pre-existing racism that exists in basically all human beings, right? I've thought this through a lot. We all have a natural fear of the other, but you can pour fertilizer on that. You look at what Hitler did, and he did that with no social media. Okay, the Jew became such a terrifying monster in the eyes of a German in the Second World War, and the run up to the Second World War as well. You can turn people into literal killing machines if you scare them enough. And this is why at the beginning of the film, we show these, old women, grandmothers with guns who want to protect themselves, in Detroit. I don't know that there's a case of any of them actually having to protect themselves, but all these grandmothers ran off and bought guns and talked about how terrified they were. This is because they were told time and again that crime is something you have to be terrified of.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me to think that we all are inherently have some racism in us. I think it's a survival. I think it's baked in. I think it's in our DNA. I think that it's a survival technique. We probably, as cavemen and women, had to fear the other or whoever was coming from a different tribe. I understand that tribalness, and what you generally do is you try to use your better angels and you try to beat that back instead of pouring fertilizer.
And let's be clear, racism goes both ways. I mean, I've talked to very close friends of mine who are black that said, I will never move to Westport. There's too many white people there. I mean, literally.
As Andrew's saying.
Let me point something out. I am not some lefty woke tool. I made a very specific report, and I report across the aisle. I'm doing a film right now that's looking at anti-Semitism on the left and how far left ideologies are leading to incredible violence and hostility towards Jews. I'm simply following a story. I was reporting on a phenomena of political efforting that I witnessed. It happens to be highly critical of the Trump administration and the Republican Party, but that doesn't reflect kind of my views. Or does reflect. I'm not going to get it. Like, I wanted to do a reasonable report, which is why, by the way, and I'll let you finish in 1 second. Sorry to cut you off. I interviewed mostly Republicans for this film. It's not a bunch of Democrats going, look how bad you are. I don't have moralizing in the film. I don't have any of that. I sat down with Bannon and Gates and Nunberg and former Breitbart writers who are, a lot of people, and not all of them are Democrats. They're still Republicans. They're just sort of confused. So you get them all.
To be clear, I agree with the premise of the film. I think it is a masterful piece of work. I just wanted
I'll take it.
to frame that.
Yeah.
Who do you then, and you just referenced all the way back to Nazi Germany, who do you think, as far as modern day, as far as American politics go, who is the architect of this fear?
Well, I think the Republican Party does it in spades. I mean, the Democrats do tons of it too. I just didn't make that movie, right?
Who is the architect?
It's Trump has some people around. Listen, Trump is so good at it. I mean, he's such a natural. It just flows off his, out of his mouth, the way to say these things. He's so good at it. I mean, when he went and he sat down with the Black Journalists Association and he started to talk about whether Kamala was from India, was an Asian Indian, or if she was black and that she'd never been black before, she'd been Indian. I don't remember the exact phrasing. He was basically testing out a line. I think he was testing out a line. It didn't work. Got some backlash and no one really ran with it. For a minute, there were a couple of pundits that tried to go, yeah, it's true. And no one really took it. And then he dropped it. But if it had worked, you would be still hearing about that today.
Oh, no, I just thought you were going to say Richard Nixon and Roger Ailes, because to me, that's where it all began. If not Newt Gingrich, who was probably the smartest operator of those politicians, but I mean going back.
Oh, sure. Oh, no. I mean, Nixon, I think Kevin Phillips and Pat Buchanan, who he hired to work in it. I mean, Kevin Phillips, who just died recently, we couldn't get him for the film because he was already ill at the time that we reached out. But Kevin Phillips is a guy that Richard Nixon hires who writes a book about demographic change in America and who is going to vote for who. And his premise, as we talk about in the film, is that the whole secret of politics is figuring out where hatreds are. And if you can figure out who hates who, you drive that hate, and that's how you win. And so Kevin Phillips, and I'm told, I've never found this in writing, but I'm told that he sort of repented for it years later. Kevin Phillips is really the genius of this Southern strategy. Unfortunately, no one actually called it a Southern strategy on the record. It was always what everyone around said about it. That's why we didn't get into it, naming it in the film. But he is the guy. And I tried so hard to get him to interview.
Wow. And so Andrew, I mean, I know you're not a political strategist or, in the business of giving advice to Democrats, but how do they turn this off? I mean, what's the answer for Democrats? They need to lean into hatred and fear, in order to win back these white voters? Or is there an antidote to turning off the fertilizer?
I think they do. I think the Democrats do lean into fear. They say a lot of things. They've tried really hard. For example, democracy's coming to an end. Now, it may be coming to an end, but they've leveraged it from the viewpoint, from the perspective of, let's try to scare the heck out of people that democracy is at its end, or that they've sort of flipped it on its head that white people are coming for you. I mean, the whole thing is becoming a back and forth with this phrase. I never really understood it until I made this film, a race to the bottom. Who can say the worst of the worst of the worst? And I don't like how politics has become on either party in that regard. Now, how do you stop something like this? I mean, the Republicans would have to just choose to stop it. And I don't think they will. It's like getting your kid to stop eating sugar. I mean, when did that ever happen? They just won't do it. No matter how much I tell them it's bad for them, they still eat the cake and the candies and the pies.
Along those lines that Allison pointed out, I mean, how effective is it when right now, probably the best modern example is Kilmar Abrego Garcia, right? I mean, the president literally photoshopped MS-13 or someone photoshopped it and gave him the photo. I mean, it was comical to the standpoint of my 13-year-old saw that photo and said, Dad, that's obviously photoshopped. But then Chris Van Hollen, the senator, goes down there and visits Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who, no matter how much you want to defend due process, does have a questionable background, to say the least, including domestic abuse. And yet they ignore Lincoln Riley in that case. And so what have Democrats learned from this when that's how they play this same cultural war? They'd rather go visit, Kilmar Abrego Garcia than defend the legislation around Lincoln Riley's death.
Look, I don't know what to make of the stunt. I mean, he goes down there, by the way, the news reporters loved it. He drew a lot of attention to it. So I think there's something to be said for his strategy. Whether or not it was effective is another story. The whole problem of due process and not giving these people a day in court, as questionable or suspect as they may be, I think we all agree we want. I don't know. I mean, I can't wrap my brain around deportations without following the law. Those are our rules. But I guess
I'm just talking about public perception here, though.
Yeah.
Like when 50% of the country sees that dynamic, it pushes them right.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Look, this is what I say. I mean, I don't think I think the Democrats are floundering. I don't think they have a message. But I mean, for me to sort of get into like what should the Democrats do in the big picture is kind of like that's a bigger story of just sort of me sort of thinking about it. But I mean, in terms of the narrative here, I think that Trump sending that guy down there really excited the base. I think they love it. I mean, I think that they love it, and I think the left hates it. But it does. Yeah, I don't know. That one's a toss up. I don't think photoshopping. I think that backfired. Do we have proof of that? Do we have to wait? Everybody said they saw it, but has anyone come forth and said they did it? By the way, I don't know that ever was.
No, but I mean, they're
still denying it, right?
It's literally the worst Photoshop I've ever seen.
But they're still denying it, right? In fact, what's the name called him out? The reporter called him out, and Trump goes, "I don't know."
They don't deny it; they just stop talking about it. But this all leads, and I think that this is in the same vein of what we're talking about. It's amazing, and your documentary touches on this, that Barack Obama won. Given all of this, it's amazing. And how do you explain it? I mean, given that these seeds were planted during Richard Nixon, and then Barack Obama comes in with hope. Hope's his message. He has this very exotic middle name of Hussein. He's half black. So all of the reasons that he shouldn't win, and he wins with that message. And so what happened? What was that blip in America that allowed that to happen?
Well, first of all, I mean, Obama was a remarkable candidate. We can't discount the fact that he was so likable and charming in a way that we had not seen since Bill Clinton. I think, that kind of Democratic candidate where people just got really excited and passionate about someone. I don't think that people got anywhere near that excited about Kamala. I mean, she didn't ignite that fire. I think in a lot of ways, I think Hillary too, kind of turned people off, and there's a sexist element in that, which we could talk about separately. But I also think that the road to Barack's success was through the black community, and he brought in huge numbers of black candidates, and this was part of what Sean Trendy writes about. That Barack said you can't win again unless you continue to get these voters of color, right? And Sean Trendy says, well, that's just not true. If we can get enough white voters, we can sort of do it. I think you have to sort of take Barack out of the equation because he was such a good, remarkable candidate and sort of look at it in the post-Barack era. And it worked for Trump. I think Trump was such a bad leader and governor, right? Not state governor, governor of the country in his first term, that he lost his second election. He didn't have to do that if he'd been a little just better at what he did, but he was so atrocious in his handling of COVID that it backfired on him. But that strategy works.
We remind viewers that we anchored at both CNN and Fox News. That being said, how do you describe the role Fox News played in this fear tactic, in this us versus them divide?
Listen, I worked at both CNN and Fox News too. Not a lot. I was at both networks for a few months each when I was, ran screaming from both. But
but what years were those?
So I was at Fox. I worked on a show called The Fox Files in 98 with Pamela Brown, who has gone
very different iteration, of course.
Oh, sure. Oh, listen, it was already a bunch of Republicans, but it was not what it is now.
So back to the premise.
Yeah.
How do you describe their role in where we are now?
I think Fox News is a brilliant enterprise, and I think that the Republican Party would be light years behind where it is right now if it did not have Fox News. I think that what they are selling now with the power of Fox and Rush. I mean, I think Rush was obviously Rush is gone now, but I think Rush was the model. I mean, I interviewed. So this is a funny story. So I interviewed for a job to work on Rush Limbaugh's show in 1994. And I met with the guy that created and found him, a guy named Stu Crane. And Stu said to me, I was working radio and we were looking for a new show to syndicate. And I found Rush in Sacramento. He's like, and the Arbitron was the Nielsen of radio, right? Arbitron ratings. He's like, the Arbitron, it was just this spike. It went like this. And then here was Rush. And then it was like this. He's like, it was this insane number. It was crazy. And that's because Rush was selling this stuff. Rush was peddling this, harken back to the olden days. America is under siege from the left. That is a incredibly saleable, marketable product. He said, and we put him national, and he just exploded, just blew up like a bomb, both in calories and in ratings. I'm kidding. And so, am I allowed to say that? My lefty friend's going to attack me for that one. But anyway,
you did.
What's that? Yeah, maybe I just
you just did. So yeah.
But anyway, no. But that was the model, and that who I think it was Roger who made Rush's TV show, right?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
They were good pals.
And
very close.
Yeah. They were pals.
We actually hung out with Rush.
Hung out's a little strong. Well, but took a picture with him.
Yes. So most of your film explores traditional cable news. I'm curious how much social media and YouTube actually plays an even greater role today and could actually inflame this 10x, 100x.
Well, look, I was having a conversation with Van Jones, by the way. Isn't he a CNN's, right? Another CNN the other day.
Yeah.
And he was talking to me about how his feed is so different from my feed. He said, and just the way he phrased it, I love the way he talks. He's really like the way he frames things is so he's always got a new perspective on things. And he said, my feed knows I'm black. And so my feed is going to keep telling me about Diddy. These are his words. My feed's constantly telling me about Diddy. He said something like, is your feed showing you about Diddy? I was like, no, my feed is not showing me about Diddy. He says, because your feed knows you're white and Jewish. And I was like, right. And he's like, my feed knows I'm black and I work. He's like, what the feeds know are so sophisticated now. The algorithms blowing away the algorithms of 10 years ago. He's like, and so I am just getting funneled this stuff. And we're talking about anti-Semitism. He's like, you're probably getting a lot of material that's telling you about what's happening to Jews and about anti-Semitism in Israel. He's like, people that are not you are not getting that. They're getting stuff telling them how bad Gaza is, and all it's feeding them is how horrible Gaza is. Well, no, let me just finish and then I'll stop. Sorry, I get carried away. No. But I think that the people that believe this stuff are getting it 24 hours a day in their feed. And you get your feed more than you get your news, right? You get it when you walk to the bathroom in the restaurant. You get it at the red light on the car. You get it when you're bored in bed. Your feed is almost bigger than your TV show that you might watch for an hour at night or two when you go to sleep. I mean, it has really taken over. I am so dominated by what I'm swiping on my phone, whether it's my Reels, my Facebook, my Instagram, my Twitter, etc., my X, you know. And so, you know, I think that it's become the dominant source of what I learn now if I'm a person that is not a professional journalist seeking information.
Well, and that's my point. A good night on Fox News, which dominates not just cable news, but all of news right now, a couple million people.
Right
now on YouTube, there are probably a couple 100 million people. So I don't know how consequential Fox is in moving forward compared to YouTube, Facebook.
But I mean, it's exactly
Meta
what Andrew's saying, which is the echo chamber. It keeps you embedded in your echo chamber. The algorithm feeds you and it outrages you and it gins you up.
That's right.
And so, of course, we're screwed, you know, because it just keeps us so activated.
But she just posted, are we screwed? What do we do about this?
Listen, you know, Sacha Baron Cohen goes in, I think it was in Europe. He gives this speech where he says that, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and whoever else, he lists the social media barons, and he says that they are the Goebbels of our day. You know, Goebbels was the minister who worked for Hitler, who spread all this information and misinformation and propaganda. I mean, that is an indicting phrase, you know, to call them that. And yet at the same time, you have to think about the fact that the worst information will get funneled to you. Lies and distortions. The amount of stuff that I get in my Facebook feed or my Reels when I'm swiping, whatever it is, that is not accurate is just incredible. I mean, it's just loads and loads of bullshit, lies, distortions, but they think that that's what I want to hear. And of course, I look at it for a second and then I swipe the next one. And before you know it, that's all I'm getting. It also seems to listen to what I'm talking about. I mean, I'll like say a thing and then it'll appear in my feed. I think that there's a voice activation too.
There must be. I agree. I just get sent a lot of new sweaters. That's what I think.
I get a lot of golf content, quite frankly.
Is there anybody more perfect for a moment of sanity than Andrew Goldberg?
Well, I want to ask you a quick question before we get there. And you've certainly thought about this. Donald Trump's second win, he gained in every single demographic. He swept the swing states. Most importantly, he doubled his support among Black men. He dramatically increased to 47% of Latino men. How do you explain that if fear and race is at the heart of all of it?
That they're not first, a couple things. I mean, we can break the groups down. I mean, a lot of Hispanics that are here now, second and third generation, don't necessarily want more immigrants to come in. I mean, you see this with other immigrant groups. I mean, I can certainly point to Jews going back when the German Jews, who were the Jews that got here in the 1850s, then the Russian Jews started to come, and the German Jews didn't like the Russian Jews. They didn't want them. They didn't respond. Some did. Let me not generalize about my people, but let me just say that there was a backlash. Who is this new group? A lot of Hispanic research that I've read has shown that a lot of Hispanics who are here now, particularly South Americans, don't necessarily want a new generation of them to come in. And as Rick Gates in the film, who was a Trump operative, mentioned, the research showed that if they said they could take their jobs or they're going to increase crime, then he found that documented immigrants didn't want more immigrants. So that's part of it with the Hispanic community. There's also part of this that there's a real concern about the fear of the left. And when you have people from Venezuela and Cuba, which are both countries that have a real problem with leftist politics, they're going to respond positively to a right-wing leader. And so I think that explains some of the Hispanic response. Now, in terms of the Black response, that's a very complicated thing that's going to require a lot more research. But I think the fact of the matter is that Trump was able to market to them messages and things about his Republican messaging that they liked, and they did not get turned off by his comments. Trump also didn't focus that much on I mean, he did certainly do his share against Black Lives Matter, but that didn't become the centerpiece of his campaign this time. And they didn't seem to care.
I mean, he demagogued immigration, and I would say
immigration
that
was his biggest selling.
If you're afraid of the other, if you accept my premise that it's baked into our DNA that we're afraid of the other on some level and we have to fight against it, immigration will work every time.
Right.
The immigration is the other. Those are the others coming in to get you.
That's not a bad point. I am curious. You brought it up. Black Lives Matter, DEI, critical race theory. Was that the appropriate reaction to what we're seeing, or a mistake that went way too far?
I think the left went too far. I mean, I don't, you're talking about, you asked me how did the left respond? I mean, I think the left took all these things too far. And why do I say that? Because of the dangerous backlash. But what we have now is a rise of anti-Semitism. And a lot of this is being pointed to the fact that the DEI initiatives don't have a space for the Jew to be. They don't have an accommodation. Somehow the Jew is seen as white, colonialist, and evil. The Jew is seen as that, not the Israeli, not the political Zionist, but Jews in general. And that to me is an example of this going too far. I think there's a lot of moderates who could go a long way with Black Lives Matter and DEI. But to the degree that it went, those people turned right. And in that sense, DEI then becomes a failure. They win the battle in the efforts, but they lose the war. Where's the right amount? I don't know the answer to that question.
Andrew, at the end of every one of our Sanity podcasts, we ask our guests for their dose of sin. For their, we don't want you to sing. For their, we don't think that would make anybody sane. For their dose of sanity. And you, because you're steeped in this stuff as a documentarian, how do you stay sane every day?
Oh my goodness, I'm not sane at all. I lost my mind many, many years ago. I mean, okay. So I started out, one of my earliest films was on the Armenian genocide, and it was all about just horror, misery, violence, and bloodshed and murder and mass murder for like no reason at all. And I got kind of depressed. And at the same time that I started working on that film, I started working on a film about animal cruelty. So it was just, I was like, you know, talking to my therapist, like, how do I get out of this miserable shithole that, are you sure I'm allowed to swear?
You're encouraged to.
Okay, good. How do I get out of this fucking shithole that I'm in? How do I get out of this? You know, and I later decided, well, I'm going to do a documentary about cats, and I wrote to PBS because I've produced almost exclusively for PBS over the years. I said, I'm going to do a documentary about cats, like a cute one, like how fuzzy they are. Cats are people too. That was going to be the name of it. And she wrote back a letter. The programmer there said, Andrew, is everything okay? Because your film has no death, no violence, no bloodshed, no mass murder, no racism, no genocide, no Holocaust. What's going on? Are you sure? Should we talk? And I realized that, you know, there was some calling for me to do this dark, miserable work. And I've done nothing but dark, miserable work now for the better part of 30 years. And so, no, my sanity was lost many, 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 many years ago. And, you know, I deal with my sanity with a good dose of sitting, eating sugar, arguing, causing trouble, being toxic, and those things help.
Yeah.
Whitewithfear.com is the website. It has a 93% score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
That shit don't happen. 93% right now. It's the 8th most popular documentary on iTunes. It's been a huge hit.
Andrew, this is wonderful. Everybody should see White with Fear. Thank you very much for just telling us about the making of it and the motivation for it. It was really fascinating. And subscribe and like.
I'm going to do that now.